The wind that morning was sharp, cutting through the open plains with a dry whisper that carried the smell of hay, dust, and cold earth. Sarah Hale stood at the edge of the Merrick Ranch, her worn boots half buried in the sandy soil. The ranch stretched far and wide, rolling fields fenced with aging posts, a barn that leaned a little too much to the west, and a house that had once been white but was now the color of old paper. It wasn't the grand homestead she'd imagined when she read the ad in town, but she wasn't here to dream. She was here to survive. Her fingers clutched the strap of her faded satchel, all that was left of her old life. A comb, a Bible with pages falling out, and a photograph of her husband taken before the mine collapsed. She had nothing else, not even the illusion that life was fair. "Ma'am," the voice came from behind her, deep and low like a slow river. She turned. Colt Merrick stood a few paces away, his hat pulled low against the sun. He was tall, broader than most, with shoulders that looked as though they had carried too much for too long. His shirt was rolled at the sleeves, his hands stained with the work of a man who built everything he had with sweat and grit. "You're Mrs. Hale?" he asked. "Yes," she said, her voice barely carrying over the wind. "You wrote for help with the barn." He gave a slow nod, eyes narrowing slightly as he studied her, not unkindly, but with the cautiousness of a man who'd learned to measure everything twice before speaking. "Didn't expect the agency to send, well, someone like you." Her chin lifted. "A woman, you mean?" He scratched the back of his neck, looking a little sheepish. "I meant someone who looks like they ain't eaten in days. Barn work's hard, dusty, dirty, and full of splinters." "I'm no stranger to hard work," she said. "I can clean, I can lift, I can stay out of the way." He looked at her for a long moment, then gestured toward the barn. "Well, no use talking about it. You can start now." She followed him, boots crunching over dry ground. The barn door moaned on its hinges as he pulled it open. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of hay and old leather. Sunlight filtered through the cracks in the boards, catching in the floating dust like golden smoke. It was worse than she'd imagined, piles of old tools scattered across the floor, broken harnesses hanging from hooks, cobwebs thick in the rafters. But to her, it was work. And work meant she could eat. "You'll find water by the trough," Colt said, setting down a bucket. "Don't go lifting anything too heavy till you get a feel for the place. You can sleep in the bunkhouse if you need to stay." Her breath caught. "Sleep here, long ride back to town," he replied simply. "And I don't take kindly to folk collapsing on my porch from exhaustion." "You can stay, but it ain't charity. You earn your keep, you keep your dignity." She nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. Thank you." He hesitated a moment longer before tipping his hat and heading toward the corral. Sarah stood there in the doorway, watching him go, that tall figure walking against the sun, the dust curling around his boots, and felt something she hadn't in a long time. Safety. Then she turned to face the barn and got to work. She started with the floor, sweeping layer after layer of dirt and straw until the boards beneath began to show. She wiped down the stall doors, mended a broken latch, and gathered a pile of discarded tools by the wall. Her arms ached, her fingers blistered, but she didn't stop. The steady rhythm of labor was a comfort, something to fill the silence that had haunted her since the mine took her husband. By midday, the barn was brighter. Sunlight spilled through clean gaps instead of clouds of dust, and the horses in their stalls seemed calmer, as if they, too, appreciated the order returning to the place. Sarah leaned on the broom, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. Her shawl had slipped off her shoulders, and her dress was streaked with dirt. She didn't care. She was breathing again. That's when she heard the small sound, a light giggle, half hidden. She turned, startled. A little girl stood in the barn doorway, barefoot, holding a ragged doll that looked stitched together from scraps. Her hair was tangled like spun straw, her face streaked with dust, and her eyes, wide, curious, impossibly blue, studied Sarah with open wonder. "Hello," Sarah said gently. "Who might you be?" The girl tilted her head. "Papa says not to talk to strangers." "Well," Sarah smiled, "I reckon he's right. But maybe I'm not a stranger anymore. I work here now." The girl took a tentative step forward. "Do you clean all day?" "I do," Sarah said. "It keeps me out of trouble." The child giggled again and walked closer. "I'm Emily," she said proudly, lifting her chin. "Papa's daughter. He says I'm his little cowgirl, but I don't like cows. They smell funny." Sarah laughed softly, a sound she hadn't heard from herself in months. "That's a fine name, Emily. I think you're brave, living out here. Emily shrugged. Papa says brave means doing things even when they scare you. You look brave. The words hit deeper than Sarah expected. I don't feel it, she whispered. Papa says that too, Emily replied matter-of-factly. Then, after a pause, she added, do you miss your family? Sarah froze. What? Papa said your husband went to heaven, Emily said innocently. And you came here 'cause you were lonely. Sarah's throat tightened. She turned away under the pretense of rearranging a saddle. Your papa talks too much. Emily giggled again, unbothered. He misses my mama too. The barn fell quiet for a moment. The wind outside picked up, rustling through the gaps in the wood. Sarah crouched beside the girl, brushing straw off her skirt. Then maybe we both understand each other a little. Emily nodded solemnly, as if sealing a secret. Then she held out her doll. You can hold her if you want. Her name's Lucy. Sarah hesitated, then took the doll carefully, its button eyes crooked but endearing. She's lovely. Papa says I talk too much to Lucy, Emily said. But Lucy doesn't mind. Sarah smiled softly. That's the best kind of friend. They stayed like that for a while, the woman and the child, the sound of the wind mixing with the soft creak of the barn. When Colt's shadow finally darkened the doorway, he stopped short. The rain came that night, sudden, wild, and cold. It started as a whisper on the roof of the bunkhouse, then grew into a roaring drumbeat that drowned out even the restless sounds of the prairie. Sarah lay awake, her thin blanket pulled to her chin, staring at the flickering shadows that the lantern threw against the wooden wall. She couldn't sleep. Something in her chest, a mix of worry and unfamiliar peace, wouldn't let her rest. When the thunder rolled close, she thought of Emily, the little girl's laughter still echoing faintly in her memory. The thought made her smile. But as lightning cracked again, followed by a frightened cry in the distance, she sat upright. It wasn't her imagination, that was a child's voice. Sarah was out the door before she thought twice, boots sinking into the mud as she sprinted toward the main house. The rain hit her face like needles, and the world was painted in flashes of white and blue. She reached the porch just as the front door burst open, and there was Colt, drenched, carrying a small, trembling bundle in his arms. She's burning up, he said, voice rough. Strained. Woke up shaking. Then started crying for her mama. Sarah didn't hesitate. Lay her down by the fire, she ordered, her tone snapping to life with the steady strength of someone who had cared for the sick before. Now, Colt blinked, surprised by the authority in her voice, but did as told. He knelt beside the hearth, laying Emily carefully on a blanket. The child's face was flushed, her breath coming quick and shallow. Sarah dropped beside her, brushing wet hair off the girl's forehead. It's fever, she murmured. How long's she been sick? Started coughing yesterday, Colt said, running a hand through his soaked hair. Didn't think much of it. She was playing fine this afternoon. Sarah touched Emily's cheek, it was burning. You have willow bark, or honey. He nodded, already moving toward the cupboard. Got both. Good, she said. And fetch water, cold as you can get it. We need to cool her down. For the next hour, the storm outside howled, but inside the ranch house, time slowed to the rhythm of small movements. Sarah dampened a cloth and laid it across Emily's forehead. She coaxed spoonfuls of water between the girl's lips and whispered soft reassurances, her voice steady even as her heart thudded painfully in her chest. Colt moved around her like a man possessed, fetching what she asked for, pacing when he wasn't doing something. The firelight carved deep lines in his face, worry tightening every one of them. Finally, when Emily's breathing steadied just a little, he sank into the chair across from Sarah. You know what you're doing, he said quietly. I used to help the midwife in town, she replied without looking up. Before my husband passed, I learned what I could. His gaze softened. You saved her. She's not out of the woods yet, Sarah said. But she'll rest easier now. Silence settled between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. The rain had slowed, and the fire crackled softly. Sarah dipped the cloth in cool water again, wrung it out, and laid it gently back on Emily's forehead. The child stirred, mumbling something half-dreamed. Sarah smiled faintly. Colt watched her, the way her hands moved with such care, the gentleness in her eyes. It stirred something deep within him that he hadn't let himself feel since his wife died, the ache of remembering warmth, the ache of wanting it again. She likes you, he said finally. Sarah glanced at him, surprised. She's a sweet child. She hasn't called anyone sweet since, he stopped, the words catching. He stared into the fire. Since her mama. The crackling logs filled the quiet that followed. Sarah's hand paused mid-motion, then resumed. You miss her, she said softly. Colt's jaw tightened. Every day. Emily barely remembers her. Sometimes I think that's a blessing. She doesn't have to hurt like I do. Sarah's throat ached. Losing someone, it doesn't stop hurting. It just gets quieter. He looked at her then, and for the first time, she didn't see the stoic rancher or the distant employer. She saw the man beneath. Raw, honest, and hurting. You talk like you know. I do, she said simply. The mine took my husband. They said it was instant, but, her voice faltered. I still wake up sometimes thinking I hear his boots on the porch. Colt didn't speak. He didn't need to. The silence between them said enough, a shared understanding that only the broken carried. After a while, Sarah stood to stir the fire, and Colt rose with her. He handed her the kettle without a word, and when their fingers brushed, the moment lingered longer than it should have. She felt warmth bloom under her skin, unfamiliar and confusing. You should rest, she said quickly, breaking the tension. I'll stay with her. He shook his head. You've done enough. Sarah looked at him, resolute. You'll do her no good if you collapse from worry. Go on. I'll wake you if she worsens. His lips twitched into something between gratitude and protest, but he finally nodded. You're a stubborn woman, Mrs. Hale. I've been called worse, she said, smiling faintly. Colt lingered a moment longer, as if unsure whether to thank her or apologize, then turned toward the stairs. His boots thudded softly on the steps, then faded away. Sarah settled into the chair beside Emily, the firelight dancing across her tired face. She hummed a tune under her breath, a lullaby she'd once sung to the child she never got to hold. Her eyes stung, but she blinked the tears away. Tonight wasn't about her pain. It was about this little girl, this fragile light in a world that had taken too much already. Hours passed. The rain stopped. The air in the room grew warm and still. When dawn finally came, pale and soft through the window, Sarah stirred from the chair. Emily's fever had broken. Her cheeks were flushed with life again, and she was sleeping peacefully. Sarah brushed a strand of hair from the girl's forehead, relief washing over her in quiet waves.